Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Blackhat USA 2022, Chuck Harold, SecurityGuyTV.com. This is episode number 2690 with my next guest, Mr. Alex, the CEO and co-founder of HiveSystems.io. Now, remember, that's HiveSystems.io. Mr. Alex, welcome back, my friend.
Hey, Chuck. Thanks for having me on again.
Now, we just spoke at RVA Sec in Richmond, my first time at that show. What a great show. I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed our conversation and invited you back here because I think you got something that really important in the cyber industry to offer. Today's topic is quantifying cyber risk. Your gut isn't good enough. Now, I agree with that statement, but I'm going to quantify my response to you and say this. Your gut is what you should use to start your process of understanding. And your gut, when it says there's something wrong, you got to act on it. We all know something's wrong. We know we're behind. We know we're trying to play catch up. And I think we don't follow those instincts enough. We say, well, I'll wait till there's a breach and then I'll deal with it. That's not a good gut reaction. That's a down position to be in. So let's talk about that. What is quantitative risk? That's a good way to describe it. And why do we need this in the world of cybersecurity?
So the idea behind quantitative risk is that for a long time, we've been using that gut instinct, right? Both to identify risks, but also about what order maybe to handle them in. That sounds like a high risk. That sounds like a moderate risk. What does that actually mean? How can that hold up to peer scrutiny or even yourself a year later when you come back to it and go, man, I don't know why I put that as medium or low. I've just kind of used my gut to do it. That's not good enough. The idea behind quantitative risk is taking something like a feeling, like a vulnerability, like a pen test report, even a compliance finding or an obligation associated with that, and assigning values and dollars and frequencies to it. This already exists to a certain extent, but it's about coming back and putting that money where your mouth is, saying this is what's going to help us fix this problem, and here's how much it's going to cost. Or more importantly, here's how much it could cost us when things go wrong. That's a big change for where we are in the industry of cybersecurity at large. Today, we're still focused on using our gut to try to drive those solutions and identify those risks. But other risk management organizations, whether at the enterprise level or in the financial sector, have been using dollars and frequencies for years. And we are behind the times. And so it's the next natural progression for the industry.
Now, I find that very interesting, and I'm going to verify that statement. So when I was at Fox, the CFO, calls my boss in the office and says, hey, here's your security budget. Can you guarantee me if I increase your budget this year, there won't be any thefts or any problems? And he goes, no, I can't guarantee that. I can't guarantee something that might not happen. He says, cut your budget in half. The entire security budget, he cut it in half. And guess what happened? Nothing. Nothing happened, right? These guys understand money, right? So why our industry is not translated this risk into it costs you this much to pay now. Paying now is always cheaper than paying later. That's a standard accounting and purchasing procedure in most corporations. So I like your approach to it. Are there algorithms involved in this? Are we using probabilities or some mathematical statistics? How are we getting to this conclusion? Because it sounds very mathematical to me.
The good news is it's really not that mathematical. And more importantly, it's not going to put us as cybersecurity professionals out of jobs. We still need our gut instinct to identify those risks. And hey, using my best estimate, my expert estimate, I can come in and assign maybe a dollar value of a breach. So knowing how many records of PII we have, I know roughly the fines from GDPR or CCPA. I can actually put a dollar figure on if that database goes missing from the low end to the high end, and maybe somewhere probably in the middle with the best guess. That same thing, though, that can happen, we can come in and say, hey, I'm going to go out and find some database encryption tools. And there's a cost per year associated with that. If we mash those two together using things like Monte Carlo simulations or Bayesian networks, more importantly, we can find and actually identify what those outcomes might be, protections we're putting in place. That's the difference here, is that ultimately we as experts are giving our inputs, but the outputs come from those algorithms, simulations that happen. So as far as being overly mathy or some hidden complex black box, it's not. But it's helping run all of those outcomes that could possibly happen and give us a percentage, a chance of it happening. That helps us when we get that question of, well, what if I gave you more money or less money? Of course, we've always said, just like you said, Chuck, hey, it probably could reduce risk, but I don't know. What if I could say, hey, it'll actually reduce our risk by 97%? That's a big difference.
That is a big difference. And that's something I'm going to listen to as a C-level executive, right? That's super important. Now, Why should we move from heat maps and ordinal scoring to quantitative methodologies? Because, I think when you put things into a visual, that's a good selling point. People understand cybersecurity in
Yeah.
visual context more than ones and zeros, most people, right? So convince me that I want to get away from that and get into what you just talked about.
Yeah, and we've seen this before, right? There's the checkerboard look where we got some red, some yellow, and some green on there, and there's maybe some numbers of risks on this heat map. What does that get us, right? How am I supposed to know? Am I just supposed to always go to the upper right of that quadrant and say, well, that's the highest risk, so I should probably start there? But is it? Ultimately, where we look at from a quantitative side is getting better outputs, getting better graphs, things like box and whiskers and slope charts that give us a better idea of where that return on investment drops off. And you can somewhere along that line and say, hey, if we do X, Y, and Z, it could happen here. But if we maybe do X, Y, Z, and A, B, and C as well, that line looks like this. That's that same visual output, but it's way better than just a output that has that colored heat map checkerboard, or even just a spreadsheet that has numbers 1, 2, and 3 next to it. Now you're having educated conversations about it. Again, Chuck, we're getting taken advantage of by our peers at oftentimes the same companies. The CFOs are running circles around us because they've been doing those same things for years. And we're behind the times on this by not arriving with that same data at that same moment.
Well, it makes sense to me. Now, what's the biggest hurdle to start using quantitative risk assessments? Is there a barrier to understanding? Is it new and people don't want to go there? What's the biggest hurdle to get this going?
Biggest hurdle is honestly working in the uncomfortable, Chuck. For a lot of us as cybersecurity practitioners, we've generally just used our gut. Hey, I think this is probably best. This hard scenario is probably a good one for this server, or the chance of phishing is pretty good. I read it in a report recently on the news. Yeah, that's fine, but it doesn't hold us accountable. As cybersecurity professionals, now we're coming in saying, I think the potential frequency of this happening is once in every 5 years. I think the most likely chance of our financial loss is $1 million as a result of that happening. That's hard. We're generally not experts at creating those estimates, but we have all the data in our heads. So it's about tuning and understanding those estimates, giving them, writing them down, and ultimately having a tool to help us calculate that accordingly. It's not a very hard statistical thing to do, but it's a hard culture shift more than anything. Getting us as professionals to both give those good inputs, but also how to understand those outputs and make educated decisions that go along with it. So it's a hurdle nonetheless, but it's not as large as it seems.
It is always about the culture, right? I mean, quick story. When I was at Fox, I decided we're going to have ID cards for everybody, ID badges. Nobody wanted to do it. I go to see Mr. Murdoch's office. He puts out a personal email and says everybody's going to carry their ID. Guess what? Everybody carried their ID because he changed the culture in a finger snap, right? He can at that level. So I see that the culture would be the hardest part. Even if everybody bought into it, there's a transition phase. So you're right on top of this, making it work, Alex. And I think you're thinking this through in a way that's going to make it successful because people are going to buy into it. Because you can build the best mousetrap. If nobody wants to use it, that's it. It's not going to be used, right? So good luck to you at Blackhat, my friend. Do you have any, are you at a booth at Blackhat or any shows or anything like that? Speaking?
No, just remote this year. We hope to be back there next year.
Yeah, me too. I hope to see you there. And maybe some other shows before that. So good luck, my friend. And good talking to you again.
That sounds great, Chuck. Thanks.